Think you know everything about Tupac's breakout film? From chair-throwing auditions that secured iconic roles to George Lucas eyeing the rapper for Star Wars, Juice hides secrets that would make even Bishop himself do a double take. These behind-the-scenes revelations prove that sometimes the wildest stories happen when the cameras aren't rolling. Fact 1. Tupac's chair-throwing audition sealed the deal. When Tupac Shakur walked into that casting room in 1991, he wasn't even supposed to be there. The future hip-hop legend had simply tagged along with his friend Money B from Digital Underground, who was auditioning for the role of Bishop in what would become the cult classic film Juice. Money B was reading for Steele originally, but when he scanned through the script, one particular character caught his attention. He passed the pages to Tupac and said, "Look at the character Bishop. This dude is just like you. You should just come to the audition and read for this other part here." What happened next would change both Tupac's life and cinema history forever. After Money B received a quick thanks but no thanks from the casting directors, they spotted Tupac sitting in the waiting area and asked if he wanted to audition. Director Ernest Dickerson was immediately impressed when Tupac first read for the role of Q, the character that would eventually go to Omar Epps. But Dickerson had an idea and handed Tupac different sides to study, asking him to read for Bishop instead. This is where the legend begins. During his audition for Bishop, Tupac didn't just read the lean sheet through a chair. The physical action wasn't scripted or suggested by anyone in the room. It was pure Tupac, channeling the rage and unpredictability that would make Bishop one of the most memorable villains in early 90s cinema. The casting directors were stunned by the raw intensity he brought to the character. Producer David Heyman, who would later go on to produce the Harry Potter films, was in the room that day and remembered what happened after Tupac finished his reading. The rapper walked out of the room, then stuck his head back in with a mischievous smile and said, "You better give me the part because I know where y'all live," before shutting the door and walking away. That combination of talent, charisma, and just the right amount of controlled danger sealed the deal. Dickerson knew immediately that they had found their Bishop. Fact 2. Ernest Dickerson's tragic personal dedications. If you watch Juice all the way through to the end credits, you'll notice a simple but heartbreaking dedication that reads, "For Janet and Tamu." Most viewers probably assume these are family members or friends of the cast, but the real story behind these names reveals one of the most tragic aspects of the film's production that few people know about. Janet was Ernest Dickerson's fiancée, and Tamu was a production assistant who worked on the crew during the making of Juice. Both women were murdered, turning what should have been a celebratory time for the first-time director into a period of unimaginable grief and loss. The dedication represents two personal tragedies that struck the director during different phases of bringing his debut film to life. The timing of these losses made them even more devastating for Dickerson, who was already under enormous pressure as a cinematographer making his transition to directing. He had worked as Spike Lee's trusted director of photography on 6 major films, including Do the Right Thing and Malcolm X, before finally getting his chance to step behind the camera as a director. Instead of being able to fully enjoy this career milestone, Dickerson found himself dealing with the murder of 2 people who were important to him. Tamu's death was particularly shocking because it happened in Brooklyn after the film had wrapped principal photography and moved into post-production. She had been part of the team that helped bring Juice to life during the 6-week shooting schedule in Harlem during March and April of 1991. Her murder occurred just as the film was being shaped in the editing room, adding a layer of real-world violence to a movie that was already exploring themes of urban crime and the consequences of street life. The decision to dedicate the film to both Janet and Tamu shows how deeply these losses affected Dickerson personally and professionally. Rather than hiding his grief, he chose to honor their memories by ensuring their names would be permanently attached to his directorial debut, creating a lasting tribute that appears every time someone watches Juice from beginning to end. Fact 3. Omar Epps' mother's Diana Ross moment. Omar Epps was just a senior in high school when he landed the starring role of Q in Juice. But his mother wasn't exactly thrilled about her son pursuing an acting career. Even after he got cast in what would become his breakout film, she remained skeptical about whether acting was a smart choice for her teenage son's future. Like many parents, she probably would have preferred he focus on more traditional career paths rather than chasing what seemed like an uncertain dream in Hollywood. The young actor from Brooklyn had been torn between two different artistic directions before Juice came along. He was part of a singing group and had been seriously contemplating a music career, but he was also drawn to acting. When the opportunity to audition for Ernest Dickerson's directorial debut came up, Epps decided to take the leap into acting, even though his mother remained unconvinced that this was the right move. Everything changed on the night of the Juice premiere. Epps and his mother were seated in the theater, probably feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness about seeing the finished film and experiencing a Hollywood premiere for the first time. But then something happened that instantly shifted his mother's entire perspective on her son's career choice. They found themselves sitting just one seat away from Diana Ross, the legendary Motown superstar and icon. For Epps's mother, this moment was like a lightning bolt of realization. Suddenly, she understood that her son wasn't just playing around with some hobby or taking a risky gamble on an impossible dream. He was sitting among genuine celebrities and entertainment industry royalty. The presence of Diana Ross at the premiere meant that her son's film was being taken seriously by the biggest names in show business. Epps later recalled how that single moment at the premiere completely transformed his mother's attitude toward his acting career. Seeing her son in the same room as Diana Ross, being treated as an equal in that exclusive Hollywood environment, finally made her realize the level of success he had already achieved. It wasn't just about the movie anymore. It was about the doors that were opening and the world her son was now part of. Fact 4. Tupac was almost Mace Windu in Star Wars. One of the most mind-blowing what-if stories in both hip-hop and Star Wars history involves Tupac Shakur nearly wielding a lightsaber in a galaxy far, far away. Before his tragic death in September of 1996, Tupac was reportedly set to audition for George Lucas to play Jedi Master Mace Windu in Star Wars Episode I, The Phantom Menace, which wouldn't be released until 1999. This incredible revelation comes from Rick Clifford, who worked as the chief engineer at Death Row Records and had developed a close relationship with Tupac. Clifford explained that their friendship grew because Tupac discovered he had worked with Brian Austin Green from Beverly Hills 90210 and had been involved in some movie productions. This connection led to many conversations between the two men about Tupac's growing film career and his ambitious plans for the future. According to Clifford, Tupac was genuinely excited about the possibility of joining the Star Wars universe. The rapper told him, "Old man, keep your fingers crossed. I got 3 movies coming up. One of them, I gotta read for George Lucas." Tupac explained that Lucas and his team wanted him to be a Jedi, and he was preparing for what could have been the role of a lifetime. Clifford recalled Tupac saying, "They wanted him to be a Jedi. I'm serious." Samuel L. Jackson got Tupac's part. The timing of this potential casting makes the story even more poignant. Tupac was killed in Las Vegas in September of 1996, and filming for The Phantom Menace began in June of 1997, less than a year after his death. This means Tupac would have been reading for the role just months before his murder, making it one of the last major opportunities he was pursuing in his acting career. The irony becomes even deeper when you consider that Samuel L. Jackson, who ultimately got the role of Mace Windu, had appeared alongside Tupac in Juice as the character Trip. Jackson went on to become an iconic part of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, complete with his famous purple lightsaber, in a role that might have belonged to his former co-star. Fact 5. The movie poster sparked gang color controversy. Paramount Pictures found themselves in the middle of a heated controversy before Juice even hit theaters, all because of a movie poster that many people felt was sending the wrong message. The studio's original promotional poster showed the 4 main actors surrounded by a bluish haze, with Tupac Shakur prominently holding a handgun, and the movie's title appearing in bright red letters alongside the tagline, "Power, Respect, Juice. How far will you go to get it?" The problem wasn't just the gun or the aggressive slogan. but the specific color combination that immediately caught people's attention. The red and blue tones used in the poster directly evoked the signature colors of the Bloods and Crips, the two most notorious rival street gangs in Los Angeles. Red has long been associated with the Bloods, while blue represents the Crips, and seeing both colors featured so prominently on a movie poster about urban violence struck many as either tone-deaf or deliberately provocative. Critics accused Paramount of creating exploitative marketing that glorified gang culture rather than presenting the anti-violence message that the film's creators claimed to be promoting. Anti-gang organizations were particularly vocal in their opposition, with groups like Mothers Against Gangs in communities, known as MAGIC, leading protests against the poster's imagery. They argued that the marketing campaign was emphasizing violence and gang aesthetics in a way that could attract the wrong kind of audience or send mixed signals about the movie's actual message. The controversy grew so intense that it caught the attention of Los Angeles television stations, which obtained and broadcast copies of the original unaltered poster during their news reports about the backlash. Under mounting pressure from community groups and negative media coverage, Paramount made the decision to redesign the poster, creating a new version that toned down the problematic color scheme. The studio defended their original marketing approach, insisting that Juice carried a strong anti-crime and anti-violence message, but the damage had already been done. The poster controversy became part of a larger conversation about how Hollywood marketed urban-themed films, and it highlighted the fine line studios had to walk when promoting movies that dealt with street life and gang culture, without appearing to glorify the very problems they claimed to be condemning. Fact 6. Tupac's $15,000 paycheck shopping spree. When Tupac Shakur received his payment for starring in Juice, he did exactly what many young people would do with their first big paycheck. He went on an immediate shopping spree. The aspiring actor and rapper was paid a total of $15,000 for his breakout role as Bishop, which came in the form of two separate checks, one for $9,000 and another for $6,000. This amount was actually quite generous for a first-time actor in an independent film with a relatively small budget. Casting director Jackie Brown later recalled that there wasn't initially a set budget for how much they could pay the actors, and the typical weekly rate at that time might have been anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. But somehow Tupac ended up earning significantly more than the standard rate, with Brown noting that, "You guys want him, he's worth every penny." The moment Tupac cashed those checks, he headed straight out to make his first major purchase as a movie star. According to Kendrick Wells, who was Tupac's friend and personal assistant at the time, the rapper immediately invested his earnings in jewelry. Wells remembered seeing both checks and watching Tupac take that money to buy what he described as either a silver collection or possibly a gold collection of jewelry. This shopping decision perfectly captured Tupac's personality and priorities at that stage of his career. Rather than saving the money or investing it in something practical, he chose to buy jewelry, something that would be visible and represent his newfound success in the entertainment industry. For a young man who had grown up without much money, having enough cash to buy a collection of precious metal jewelry represented a significant milestone. The purchase also reflected the hip-hop culture of the early 1990s, where jewelry was often seen as both a status symbol and a way to display financial success. For Tupac, who was still establishing himself as both a rapper and an actor, that jewelry collection represented tangible proof that his artistic talents were starting to pay off in a very real and immediate way. Fact 7. The film was Spike Lee's cinematographer's directorial debut. Ernest Dickerson had spent years working behind the camera as one of Hollywood's most respected cinematographers before he finally got his chance to step into the director's chair with Juice. What made his transition from cinematographer to director even more significant was his long-standing creative partnership with Spike Lee, one of the most influential filmmakers of the late 1980s and early 1990s. Dickerson first met Spike Lee when both men were students at New York University's film school, and their collaboration began almost immediately. Their first project together was Lee's master's degree thesis film called Joe's Bed-Stuy Barbershop. We Cut Heads in 1983, which ended up winning a Student Academy Award. This early success, launched a professional relationship that would define both of their careers for the next decade. As Lee's go-to director of photography, Dickerson was the visual architect behind 6 major Spike Lee films that helped establish the director as a powerhouse in American cinema. He shot She's Gotta Have It in 1986, School Days in 1988, Do the Right Thing in 1989, Mo Better Blues in 1990, Jungle Fever in 1991, and Malcolm X in 1992. Each of these films showcased Dickerson's innovative cinematography and helped create the distinctive visual style that became synonymous with Spike Lee's work. Beyond his creative contributions, Dickerson also achieved a historic milestone in 1990, when he became the first African-American member of the American Society of Cinematographers. This prestigious organization, known by its initials ASC, represents the elite level of the cinematography profession, and Dickerson's membership broke an important barrier in an industry that had traditionally excluded people of color from its highest ranks. When Dickerson finally made his directorial debut with Juice in 1992, it marked the end of his exclusive partnership with Spike Lee, as Malcolm X became their final collaboration as director and cinematographer. The transition wasn't entirely surprising, since Dickerson had often found himself functioning as a co-director during the many scenes where Lee acted in his own films, giving Dickerson valuable experience directing actors while Lee performed in front of the camera. Fact 8. A deadly real-life connection to the film. 2 years after Juice hit theaters, the film became connected to a tragic real-world murder case that demonstrated how deeply movies can sometimes influence vulnerable young people. In 1994, a murder trial in Cardiff, Wales made international headlines when 3 young gang members claimed they were directly mimicking scenes from Juice when they brutally kicked a young man to death. The case involved 4 young men who were part of a local gang, and during their trial, 3 of them specifically cited the movie as their inspiration for the violent attack. They told the court that they were copying what they had seen in Ernest Dickerson's film when they carried out the deadly assault on their victim. The defense strategy of blaming a movie for their actions brought significant media attention to the case and sparked debates about the influence of violent films on impressionable viewers. The legal proceedings resulted in serious consequences for all 4 defendants, though their punishments varied based on their level of involvement in the crime. 3 of the young men who claimed to be imitating Juice were convicted of murder, which carried much harsher sentences under British law. The 4th participant in the attack was found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter, suggesting that the court determined he played a different role in the victim's death or had less intent to cause fatal harm. This case became part of a larger cultural conversation about media influence and youth violence that was happening throughout the 1990s. Movies like Juice, along with other urban crime films of the era, were often scrutinized for their potential impact on young audiences, particularly those already living in environments where violence was common. The Cardiff murder trial was cited in various discussions about whether films depicting street violence were contributing to real-world crimes, or simply reflecting existing social problems. The connection between the film and this deadly incident was documented in reports by the Times of London on March 23, 1994, ensuring that this tragic case would forever be linked to Juice in legal and media archives. The case remains one of the most direct examples of defendants claiming a specific movie influenced their criminal behavior in a murder trial. Fact 9. Tupac's mysterious absence from the soundtrack. One of the most puzzling aspects of Juice is that Tupac Shakur, who delivered the film's most memorable and intense performance as Bishop, is completely absent from the movie's soundtrack album. This absence becomes even more strange when you consider that the Juice soundtrack went on to become one of the most successful and influential hip-hop compilations of the early 1990s, earning gold certification from the Recording Industry Association of America. On March 4, 1992, the soundtrack was a who's who of early 90s hip-hop and R&B talent, featuring artists like Naughty by Nature with their hit Uptown Anthem, Eric B. and Rakim with the theme song Juice Know the Ledge, Big Daddy Kane, Salt and Peppa, and Cypress Hill. The album peaked at number 17 on the Billboard 200 chart, and reached number 3 on the top R&B and hip-hop albums chart, proving that there was definitely a market for Tupac's music if he had been included. What makes his absence even more mysterious is that Tupac was already an established recording artist at the time of filming. His debut album, Tupacalypse Now, had been released in November of 1991, just 2 months before Juice hit theaters in January of 1992. The album had already generated controversy and critical acclaim, so it wasn't as if Tupac was an unknown rapper who hadn't proven himself in the music industry. The soundtrack was produced by Hank Shocklee and the Bomb Squad on Shocklee's newly established SOUL record label, which was a joint venture with MCA Records. This was actually Shocklee's feature film composing debut, adding another layer of significance to the project. The decision to exclude Tupac from such a high-profile soundtrack compilation remains unexplained, especially since his musical style would have fit perfectly with the other artists featured on the album. Hip-hop fans and movie soundtrack enthusiasts have long wondered about this glaring omission, particularly since Tupac's absence is so noticeable on what many consider to be one of the best collections of early 90s hip-hop music ever assembled for a film. Fact 10. The famous two-gun movie mistake. One of the most glaring continuity errors in Juice happens during the film's most crucial scene, when Bishop shoots his friend Raheem in the abandoned building after their botched robbery. Sharp-eyed viewers who watch this sequence carefully will notice that Tupac's character appears to be holding 2 completely different revolvers at the same time, creating a confusing visual that has puzzled movie fans for decades. The mistake occurs when Raheem walks over to confront Bishop and demand that he hand over the gun they used during the robbery. As the tension builds between the 2 former friends, viewers can clearly see one revolver tucked into Bishop's left pocket, with the grip visibly sticking out. However, when Bishop draws his weapon to shoot Raheem, he pulls out a completely different gun from behind his back with his right hand, leaving audiences wondering where the second weapon came from. Some fans have tried to explain this inconsistency by suggesting that Bishop must have taken the convenience store owner's gun after killing him during the robbery, giving him 2 weapons to carry. However, if you watch the movie carefully, the gun that store owner Quiles pulled during his confrontation with Bishop and the rival gang was actually a long-nosed revolver, while the weapon Raheem was carrying was a snub-nosed revolver. Neither of these matches what Bishop is seen holding in the pocket during the fatal confrontation. This continuity error becomes even more problematic later in the film during the final chase sequence on the rooftop. When Bishop is pursuing Q through the building and firing at him repeatedly, he seems to shoot far more than 6 rounds without ever stopping to reload his revolver. Since revolvers typically hold only 6 bullets, Bishop would need to pause and manually reload his weapon, which would be impossible with the type of gun he's supposed to be carrying. Movie mistake enthusiasts have cataloged this error as one of the most obvious continuity problems in Juice, and it demonstrates how even small prop management issues can create noticeable inconsistencies that take viewers out of otherwise intense dramatic moments. Fact 11. A high school prank that turned physical. The cast of Juice may have been playing friends on screen, but behind the scenes their relationships weren't always smooth, especially when practical jokes went too far. Jermaine Hopkins, who played Steele in the film, decided to pull what he thought would be a harmless prank on his co-star Tupac Shakur during production. But the joke backfired in a way that nobody expected. Hopkins later revealed that Tupac had a habit of walking off the set during filming, which apparently frustrated some of the cast and crew members. Whether Tupac was taking breaks to deal with the intensity of playing Bishop or simply needed time to himself, his frequent departures from the set became noticeable enough that Hopkins decided to mess with him about it. The prank itself seemed innocent enough at first. Hopkins approached Tupac and told him that he was being fired from the film, probably thinking it would be funny to see Tupac's reaction to what was obviously fake news. Hopkins likely expected Tupac to laugh it off or maybe get briefly worried before realizing it was just a joke between cast members who were supposed to be building friendships during the production. However, Tupac's reaction was far more intense than Hopkins had anticipated. When Tupac found out that Hopkins had been lying to him about being fired, He didn't see the humor in the situation at all. Instead of laughing off the prank or just getting verbally upset about it, Tupac became physical with Hopkins, leading to an actual altercation between the two actors. This incident reveals something important about Tupac's personality during the filming of Juice. He was clearly taking his role and his career very seriously at this point, and the idea of being fired from what was essentially his breakout acting role was not something he could joke about. For someone who was trying to establish himself as both a rapper and an actor, the thought of losing such an important opportunity was genuinely threatening, even if it was just a prank. The physical confrontation between Hopkins and Tupac shows how the intense atmosphere of making Juice sometimes spilled over into real-life tensions between the cast members. Fact 12. Omar Epps actually learned to DJ. Most actors preparing for roles that involve specialized skills rely on movie magic, clever camera angles, and body doubles to create the illusion that they know what they're doing. But Omar Epps took a completely different approach when preparing to play Q, the aspiring DJ at the heart of Juice's story. Instead of faking his way through the turntable scenes, Epps made the commitment to actually learn how to spin records like a real DJ before filming began. This decision to master the craft authentically was unusual for Hollywood productions, where actors typically receive just enough training to look convincing on camera for a few specific shots. Most films would have used close-ups of a professional DJ's hands on the turntables, then cut to wider shots of the actor pretending to work the equipment. But Epps understood that his character's dream of becoming a DJ was central to the entire story, and he wanted to bring genuine skill and credibility to those scenes. The time and effort Epps invested in learning to DJ paid off in every scene where Q is shown working the turntables. When you watch him manipulating records, adjusting levels, and working the crossfader during the DJ battle sequence, you're seeing real technique rather than an actor going through the motions. His hand movements, timing, and interaction with the equipment all demonstrate actual knowledge of how DJing works, creating a level of authenticity that audiences can feel even if they don't consciously notice it. This commitment to realism was particularly important because DJ culture was such a vital part of early 1990s hip-hop, and the film's target audience would have immediately spotted fake turntable work. Hip-hop fans who lived and breathed DJ culture could tell the difference between someone who actually knew how to work turntables and someone who was just pretending, so Epps's authentic skills helped the film maintain credibility with its core audience. The authenticity of Epps' DJ scenes also enhanced the emotional impact of Q's storyline, as viewers could see that this character genuinely possessed the talent and passion needed to pursue his musical dreams, making his conflict with Bishop's criminal path more meaningful and believable. Fact 13. The film's incredibly profitable budget ratio. While big-budget blockbusters often grab headlines for their massive earnings, Juice proved that sometimes the most impressive financial success stories come from smaller films that maximize their return on investment. With a modest production budget of just $4 to $5 million, the film went on to earn $20.1 million worldwide, creating one of the most impressive profit ratios in Hollywood for 1992. This remarkable financial performance was made possible by the film's lean production approach and the breakthrough success of previously unknown actors. Island World Productions had initially struggled to secure funding for the project, but the subsequent successes of other urban-themed films like New Jack City and Boys and the Hood generated renewed interest from studios and financiers who were eager to capitalize on this emerging market. The film's path to profitability became even more impressive when you consider the competitive bidding war that erupted over distribution rights. Every major Hollywood studio wanted to get involved once they saw the quality of the finished product, and Paramount Pictures ultimately won the domestic distribution rights by promising a $10 million marketing and advertising budget. This meant that Paramount was willing to spend twice the film's production cost just on promoting it to audiences. The opening weekend alone demonstrated the film's commercial potential, as Juice earned an impressive $8 million during its first 3 days in theaters on Martin Luther King Day weekend in January of 1992. This strong opening performance indicated that audiences were hungry for the kind of authentic urban storytelling that Ernest Dickerson and his cast were delivering. Based on its ratio of production cost to total earnings, Juice was reportedly ranked as the sixth most profitable film of 1992. This achievement was particularly significant because it proved that films featuring African American stories and actors could be extremely profitable when made with relatively modest budgets and marketed effectively to their target audiences. The financial success of Juice helped pave the way for more urban-themed films throughout the 1990s and demonstrated that authentic storytelling combined with emerging talent could create both critical acclaim and impressive box office returns. Fact 14. Tupac demanded to stay in character on set. Tupac Shakur's approach to playing Bishop went far beyond what most actors do when preparing for a role, as he insisted on maintaining his character's identity even when the cameras weren't rolling. Throughout the entire filming process of Juice, Tupac made it clear to everyone on set that he wanted to be called Bishop instead of his real name, creating an intense atmosphere that kept him locked into the mindset of his dangerous character. This level of method acting was unusual for someone who was essentially making his acting debut in a major film role. Most first-time actors are nervous about remembering their lines and hitting their marks, but Tupac was so committed to authentically portraying Bishop's psychology that he refused to break character between takes. He understood that Bishop was a complex and volatile character who required a deep psychological commitment, and he didn't want to risk losing that intensity by constantly switching back and forth between his real personality and his character's mindset. The cast and crew learned to adapt to Tupac's unusual request, addressing him as Bishop during breaks, lunch periods, and casual conversations on set. This created a somewhat surreal working environment, where everyone had to interact with Tupac as if he were actually the unpredictable and potentially dangerous character he was portraying. For his fellow actors, this meant they were essentially rehearsing their scenes even during downtime, as they never knew when they were talking to Tupac the person or Bishop the character. Omar Epps later commented on Tupac's method acting approach, noting how the rapper's commitment to staying in character added an extra layer of authenticity to their scenes together. Since Bishop and Q's relationship forms the emotional core of the film, having Tupac maintain that character's energy and unpredictability even between takes helped create a more realistic dynamic between the two actors. This dedication to method acting also helps explain why Tupac's performance as Bishop remains so memorable and unsettling more than 30 years after the film's release. By refusing to step out of character, he was able to maintain the psychological intensity that made Bishop such a compelling and frightening antagonist. Fact 15. The film's specific Harlem street locations. Unlike many movies that use generic urban settings or recreate city neighborhoods on studio lots, Juice was filmed at precise real-world locations throughout Harlem, creating an authentic geographical portrait of the neighborhood as it existed in the early 1990s. Director Ernest Dickerson made the deliberate choice to shoot on location in the actual streets where stories like this would unfold, giving the film a documentary-like authenticity that audiences could feel in every scene. The production used a Philip Randolph High School, located at 443 West 135th Street in Harlem, as the school that Q, Bishop, Raheem, and Steele were supposed to attend. This was a real functioning high school in the neighborhood, and using it as a filming location meant that the cast was performing their scenes in the same hallways and classrooms where actual Harlem teenagers spent their days. The choice to use a genuine neighborhood school rather than a movie set added layers of realism to the characters' daily lives. Several specific street corners in Harlem also became important filming locations that fans can still visit today. St. Nicholas Terrace and 135th Street served as the corner where the crew meets up with Steele when he's running late, while Convent Avenue and West 129th Street was used for the scene where Bishop has his second confrontation with Radames and his gang. The production also filmed at 416 West 129th Street, using the doorstep where Radames and his gang chase off a passerby while Bishop watches them. The 6-week filming schedule that began on March 13, 1991, was entirely conducted on location in New York City, with the vast majority of scenes shot in various Harlem neighborhoods. This commitment to authentic locations meant that the cast and crew were working in the same environment that their characters inhabited, surrounded by the actual sights, sounds, and atmosphere of early 1990s Harlem. For viewers who know Harlem well, watching Juice becomes like taking a time capsule tour of the neighborhood as it existed more than 30 years ago, complete with specific buildings, street corners, and local landmarks that help anchor the story in a very real place and time.